Welcome to UCA's professional learning session. This session is actually presented by a class in our instructional technology program. We have 11 presenters today, so we're going to try to roll through them pretty quickly. Each presenter will talk for about 10 minutes on their chosen topic, and then we will move on to the next. If you've ever been in like a presentation that's a snapshot, this will work very similar. Just remember also that this session is being recorded. You can view the session on YouTube. It will be posted in a couple of weeks, and I'll put the links in the chat of where you can find all of that information. Your Arkansas PD certificate, if you need to submit that to whomever at your district, will be sent 24 to 48 hours. I usually try to send them the next day, so you'll receive that in your email. It has a unique ARPD code for 2 hours of professional development credit. And then we'll also have, I'll pop in some links to our evaluation forms as well so that you can fill that out. It will also come to you when you get your PD certificate. There'll be a link in case you miss it in the chat for the evaluation. All right, I think that is all of my little spiel that I have to do. And we're going to get started. Oh, hello. I see people popping in. If you want to say hi in the chat. I know Tarina, Shelly, hello. Just letting us know who they are and where they're from. And we're going to get started with our first presenter, Roxy.
So do I just go ahead and share my screen?
Yes, go right ahead. Sorry, I muted myself and then I was talking to you like you could hear what I was saying.
It says that you've disabled participants.
That's awesome. All right, now go.
Okay. See if it works. Fingers crossed. Okay, can y'all see?
Yes, you are good to go.
Perfect. So this is my first professional presentation, so just bear with me. My name is Roxy Anderton. I do talk fast when I get nervous, so I'm going to do my best to slow everything down. The topic that I am going to discuss today is the equity gap in education. So to start with, I'd like to talk about like what is the equity, like what does that mean? What does equity gap even mean? And a lot of times it's used with like the words equality. You hear it with achievement gap. And so I found, I'm going to play a snippet of this TED talk with Dr. Lindsay Ott. She really explained it well. It's just a short amount of time, so hopefully it'll play.
Everyone knows the results of equal education. You've all
Roxy, we lost sound on that.
Let me see if I can make it work. Did it play at all for the sound?
It started and then it cut, like it was still videoing, but the sound just disappeared.
Okay, let me see if it'll work this time.
Everyone knows the results of equal education. You've all heard of the achievement gap. An achievement gap occurs when one group of students scores higher than another when they're grouped by gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. Equality reinforces that achievement gap by imposing the same standards and norms on really different groups of people. Equity, on the other hand, would close that achievement gap by giving the needed support and support structures to those very different groups. Equality and equity are not synonymous. Equality is giving everybody a size 10 pair of shoes. Some people are going to be really excited about the size 10 pair of shoes unless you don't wear a size 10. Equity is giving everyone a pair of shoes that fits. In order to close the achievement gap, we have to give every student a pair of shoes that fits. And that means designing curriculum and instruction for each individual student and their personal challenges.
Okay, So she goes on and talks more about equity gaps in her video. It's a really great one. I definitely suggest going and watching it if you haven't seen it yet. She was very cohesive with everything that she shared. So the equity gap used to be called just the achievement gap, and now they've added in a lot of different types of equity gaps. You have achievement, confidence, funding, threshold, excellence. Today, I'm going to try to just focus on like achievement and confidence within the equity gaps, because I feel like that's something as educators in the classroom, we have a little bit more control over how to help move forward. So in her video, in her TED Talk, Dr. Ott talks about giving each student individualized instruction based on what they need. And me as a classroom teacher with 20 plus kids, my brain automatically goes, I don't know how I'm supposed to do that. How am I supposed to give individualized instruction for 20 plus kids, create different assessments? How am I supposed to do that? And she goes on to say later, because she knows that she had the same fears and she hears them from other teachers, that the core business of a teacher is to provide students with the tools they need to succeed, not provide them with grades. And I know I'm guilty of it. As a teacher, sometimes you get so focused on, well, I have to get my grades and I have to get them where they need to be. And we're not focusing on, are we hitting the standards that they need to hit? So I think that's a shift that educators have to kind of look for whenever they're thinking about closing that equity gap. So when we think about the equity gap, we think about like, who does it affect? And it really is going to affect students from low income families, students from different racial and cultural groups, learners with special needs, but also high achieving students, because that gap goes both ways. And a lot of times in the classroom, especially now, they're pushing for us to bring up the lower end, and our higher end just kind of sits and floats. It doesn't get to go as well. So that's why they're on there with the other students that you may see. So some of the ways that it really affects the students is they come with low expectations being put on them. They don't have any motivation. They're not going to be engaged with what they're learning. And a lot of times the students will drop out before they get to high school. They don't have support at home. So if they don't find it in the classroom, then they really don't have any reason to be there. So when we think about bridging that divide, we have really three kind of tiers. We have, like our institution, our school, we have our classroom, and then we have ourselves. I think this one has ourselves and then our classroom with personal instructional on the infographic. So that's what I'm going to try to hit a little bit on each one. I'm going to try and not take a long time on there because we are short on time. So it's going to be minimize them. There's a lot of information on all of it. So what I present is not everything that there is on there. So really you need to start, in the research I found in my personal experience in recommendation discussing equity gaps, you need to start with your self-reflection, start with you. Do you have any personal biases, gender biases, cultural biases? What are your expectations that you're putting on your students? Are you listening to other teachers whenever they say, oh, you got so-and-so, they're terrible, they didn't ever do their work, they talk all the time, they're horrible students, I hate you had that student? Are you going to listen to that and carry that over, or do you give them all a blank slate when they walk through the door? And then also, how do you talk to your students? Do you change how you talk to certain students? Do you interact with them in questions where they can actually respond to you, or do you give, short one-word answer questions? So those are things personally that we can work on to try and help make our students feel more comfortable. In the classroom, and the reason that I'm talking about the ways to make students feel more comfortable is that if we can help allow our students to have a safe space to learn and to feel important, then that's going to help on our end to bridge the gap, because if they feel like they can, then they will. So in your learning environment, it may not be a classroom, it could be on the field, it could be, in the choir room, wherever you have your students at. Are you creating a safe space for them? Are you encouraging them to be respectful to each other? Are you allowing certain students to behave one way and other students to behave another way? Another thing is to be really aware of the different cultures in your classroom. You may have students that celebrate different holidays, that have different things that they do at home that they may want to share in the classroom. It's really good for you to find a way to get your students to relate to each other. For lower grades, it could be like, you know, the brown bag where they put the things in there that describe them and they share it. And older grades, it could be a presentation or a video or however they wanted to share it. So they have all of these different options to share, and this helps the students to build connections to each other. They understand and learn about other students, they find commonalities, and then they become a more of a cohesive unit in the classroom. We also need to try in the classroom to give students a voice. So a lot of times teachers will have, you know, instead of a 45-minute lecture, maybe do 5 to 10-minute lecture and then group discussions with the class. Let them share what they got out of it, what questions they have. That kind of helps pull the students in and helps them put themselves in charge of the learning. And that helps also with that motivation, with engagement, with all of those things that are making them fall through the gaps. We should also make sure that we're trying to create like creative inquiry-based learning, problem-based learning, giving them options for how they present. I know, you know, we talked about before, how do you make different instruction for all of these students? Well, if you give them, you know, a choice board, or if you give them, let them even come up with their own way to present, they're still on the same topic, but they are sharing it in a way that works for their brains. And then this, I won't read this all to you. I have this in the handout things that I put for our class. I can share it if I need to. This is just kind of some other ways to help make an equitable classroom environment, to help make students feel more welcome and accepted and know what's expected of them. And then last, I'm going to touch on really briefly your team. That's like your building, your district, your administration, your teachers, your staff that come in. That's janitors, cafeteria, everybody. I think it's really important that everybody comes together and has the big discussions, you know, like what kind of cultures do we see in our district, you know, like what do our students need, where are our gaps at, what trainings do we need to be more aware. And a lot of times admin can be too busy to look for those things. So as teachers, we may need to help find like, hey, I think our teachers would really benefit from this PD. This talks about this really important topic. And then being consistent with it, because if you just do it at the start of the year, at the beginning of the year PD, and then you don't look at it ever again, it's not going to be effective. So those big conversations are important. I also will not read this one, but it is with my other handouts. It's just kind of what kind of roles and things you should associate with the teachers and with the administrators and how they can help with each other. And then my sources, I tried to not word vomit too bad, so hopefully that went okay. And I hope that I provided a little bit of clarity on the equity. It is a very big topic and I have a lot of passion for it. So it was really hard for me to try and like minimize it down into the snapshot. I don't know if I'm supposed to ask if there are questions or not.
Yes, if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to unmute or pop it in the chat. I also put a link in the chat to, Roxy mentioned being aware of your own biases. And if you've never looked at the rings of culture and what your rings of culture are, that's a great place to start. And I also have your link to the Canva presentation if you want me to put that in the chat for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any questions for Roxy? All right, we're going to roll on to Wendy.
Hey, everybody. Let me go in and try to do the share screen. Can everybody see? Is that coming up okay?
Yes, we've got it pulled up.
All right. Let me... Not that, sorry. Okay, so I am doing my presentation on cyberbullying and hate speech. And my title is Please Keep Me Safe, because we've got students who are in an environment that is very detrimental to them. So I'm Wendy Kohler. I teach 7th grade at Joe T. Robinson Middle School. So my talking points, first, I'm just going to go into a little bit of background information on cyberbullying and hate speech. Then what is it that students need to know, what educators need to know and do, and then what is our role as tech leaders. So first, I think I missed something's not, okay, sorry. Cyberbullying. In very simple terms, bullying, but just in a different setting, through things like social media, online chat rooms, gaming platforms, especially for our boys, but we've got a lot of girls that are gaming as well. And this has become a very commonplace also for cyberbullying. Cyberbullies can be, they are usually someone that the victim knows, and very rarely an anonymous user. Most of the time, they're a very targeted person. They are someone that the cyberbully knows and has an issue with of some sort. It's easier for someone to cyberbully because they don't actually have to be with the person in person, and they can do it from being hidden behind a screen. Some of the concerns, the unique concerns that come with cyberbullying are that it's persistent. The victim can't, with a regular bully at school, a victim can go home and kind of stay hidden from that person. But with cyberbullying, it's a different situation, because 24 hours a day that cyberbully has access to that person and can get to them even in their own safe space at home. It's permanent. Most things that are shared online are observed by a lot of people, and it's hard to be removed. And then it further complicates things because not only the victim, but the bully create digital footprints that can damage things for them in the future. But being permanent is something that a lot of victims struggle with. It's hard to notice. Teachers, adults don't really get to see it as much. If you're a school teacher and you are walking down the hallway, you might overhear something, you might notice something. With cyberbullying, it makes it much harder to observe. Some tactics that are used by cyberbullies. Some of the most common ones that I think we all know are the lies and the false accusations, jealousy bullying. Nude photo sharing, unfortunately, is becoming a more common thing, especially with middle school and high school. Doxing is a term that I did not know, but it's basically short for documents, where someone goes in and finds out a whole bunch of personal information, addresses, telephone numbers, things like that about the person, and then shares it out to social media or to the internet. A sock puppet is also another term that I did not know, but an example would be, let's say 2 girls are upset with or mad at or want to pick on another girl. So they go in and create an identity of being a young man. And then this so-called young man starts flirting with the girl that they don't care for, and begins to draw in a relationship with them, and then totally turns on the girl, and it just becomes a big problem. Socially, economically disadvantaged students are often bullied because of how they dress or where they live. And then the other one is encouraging self-harm or suicide. Not exactly the same situation, but if you've seen The Girl from Plainville, the young girl convinced her boyfriend to commit suicide. But I myself have dealt with and seen some situations where cyberbullies have encouraged and tried to convince someone in my school building to harm or commit suicide. So it's a real scary thing. What is hate speech? Hate speech and cyberbullying kind of go together. They're both incredibly ugly, but hate speech is different in that it is targeted at a specific group, usually to show some kind of prejudice against a race, a religion, sexual orientation. And my screen is slowed up. An article in USA Today said that 53% of Americans say that they've dealt with hate speech and harassment in 2018. The year before, it was at 18%. That's a huge jump in hate speech and targeting behavior. For a third of Americans, online abuse was in relation to their sexual orientation, their gender identity, their a disability, possibly religion, race, ethnicity. So we can see that there's a huge increase in the amount of people that are dealing with this kind of thing. A quote from Norwicki in 2021 said that each year, millions of K through 12 students experience hostile behaviors like bullying, hate speech, hate crimes, or assault. In the school year 2018-19, about 1.3 million students ages 12 to 18 were bullied for their race, religion, national origin, disability, gender, or sexual orientation. So we definitely have things that we need to deal with and help our students. And the scary thing for me is that I noticed is that we're dealing with K through 12 students, not just, middle school students or high school students, but all the way down to kindergarten. So what do we need to, what do students need to know? First of all, they need to know their digital footprint. They need to understand it. They need to know that what they post, what they like, what they comment on, what they tag, all of those things are crucial for your digital footprint. Is basically everything that you've posted can be seen, and it becomes part of your digital record, so to speak. I did put in my documents and my handouts the student guide to publishing, and it gives a lot of information for students on, think about what you're posting, and it talks more specifically on being careful about what you post. What are my healthy options? If I don't feel safe, or I am not comfortable with or agree with what somebody is saying online, what are some of my options? And another handout that I put in was how to deal with the haters. Some of the initial things they said were to ignore. And it's so hard to ignore stuff like that because it infiltrates and it hurts. But teaching students to how they can go in and block, how they can report things, report abusive behavior to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat. There are those options available within those social media, teaching our kids how to do that. Another thing they said was be kind and respectful, even to the haters. And this is hard, but this is why educators, and I'll talk about it in a second, why educators have to teach our students how to respond when you're in a tough situation. Develop a relationship with a trusted adult, someone that they can go to, and also really teaching our kids how to use the tools to document things, use screenshots, chat and text logs, time, date stamps, screen recordings, so that they can take these things to a parent, to the trusted adult, and be able to kind of hold their cyberbully in check. I don't know why it's not. So as an educator, how do I help? You've got to look at the standards. And my suggestion is go to the ISTE standards. The ISTE standards do a great job of teaching educators how to communicate things to our students. The ISTE standard 2.3 citizen, it says educators inspire students to positively contribute to and responsibly participate in the digital world. Engage with your students, know them, set the example for them. And just like Roxy said in her presentation, create a safe space for the students. They've got to be able to know that when they come into your classroom, when they come into your building, that this is a safe space, that they aren't going to be bullied, they aren't going to be harassed, they're not going to be told that because they're gay, they're not important. And so they've got to understand that where they are is safe for them. Look to your tools. You have all kinds of tools in this digital era that we live in. There's so many websites, websites that already have lesson plans already available to you. Common Sense Media is a fantastic website. In another grad school class I did last semester, I looked deeply into Common Sense Media, and they have great lessons on cyberbullying and hate speech for all grade levels, K through 12. Be Internet Awesome is a Google program too, Brain Pop. But one of the key things you need to remember is don't just put a lesson out there, make sure that it fits the needs of your students. Use your professional learning network and your digital leaders. I'm not going to read all these. I'm trying to move quickly. What are the signs? So if your child or your student is a target of cyberbullying, these are some signs that you might notice. They might unexpectedly stop using their device. They become withdrawn from friends and families, and they lose interest in the things that mattered to them. Also, what is my screen? Okay, hold on. Sorry, guys, my computer is, okay, I do have those in my documents. How can the tech leader play a role? Oh, there it went, sorry. Okay, so how can the tech leader play a role? Provide resources to your stakeholders. Parents need to know parents and students need to know what is the policy on cyberbullying and hate speech for your building. Get the message out and the resources out. So the handouts that you have for parents, tips on things to look for, get those out to your stakeholders. Professional learning network, support and feedback to other people within your building. Acquire resources, give them out, share your knowledge and experience when you've been through a situation. Make sure to keep names out of it, but share your experience and how you worked through it. Focus on the standards, look at your ISTE standards and combine them with your pillars of digital leadership. Teach and model. We're trying to teach our kids how to communicate better, how to collaborate, which are 21st century skills, but we've got to provide them opportunities to practice these in safe settings, like using debates and Socratic seminars to teach them how to properly disagree. And then my quote, sometimes it only takes one image. Does that image build someone up or does it tear it down? And then a quote from Adam Newman, as the world becomes a more digital place, we cannot forget about the human connection.
Thank you, Wendy. Does anyone have any questions for her? Wendy, I have your slide deck downloaded. Do you want me to pop that link into the chat for people to grab the resource if they would like?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. All right, Caroline is up.
Hold on, I'm trying to get it to share my screen and it's saying unknown for PowerPoint.
Oh, that's fun times.
So one thing I did want to ask before I get started. So I'm curious, this is related to my topic. If you could estimate how many of your students were actively engaged in online learning and virtual learning, not who was not engaged, who really was active with their learning. If you could make an estimate in the chat, that would be great. 20%. Ooh, these are some interesting. Sorry, I'm gonna have to share my entire screen for it to work. 20, 30, 30, 40, 50, 25, 30, 40. Interesting.
It looks like common is mainly 30 to 40%, which is less than half.
So I don't know. If you can see this, can you?
Yeah, we've got it. We can see.
Okay, cool. So today I'm going to talk about the problem with progress. We're going to be talking about the digital divide and how it impacts us as teachers and honestly, pretty much everyone. We're going to be talking about the aspects. So what is the digital divide? Who is affected by it? The issues that can come from it and solutions we can take on as teachers and as individuals to help bridge this gap. So what is the digital divide? A simple definition from the dictionary, the digital divide is the economic, educational, and social inequalities between those who have computers and online access and those who do not. But of course, we know that a definition doesn't really encompass everything that something is. This is a really big concept, so let's break it down some more. Focusing a little more, the digital divide is in everyone who has access to high-speed internet. So, and people who have access to reliable devices. So unfortunately, the internet is not always available to everyone. It can be expensive. It can be out of range for them. And honestly, it's very limited resource. Not everyone has internet. And on top of that, not everyone, even if they do have internet, has reliable devices. They could be limited to out-of-date devices, public shared devices such as library computers. And this is just something we really need to consider as teachers is how this is impacting us as educators. So who are the victims? Who is affected by the digital divide? So we have 4 major populations, and of course it doesn't encompass everyone who is affected by the digital divide. We have young and old generations. So this statistic stated that 77% of older people require a walkthrough to set up a device. I mean, honestly, I got a new computer recently and I still didn't even know how to set it up. With the exponential growing technology, it's becoming increasingly harder to keep up with everything. And when we think about, older generations who are not as used to these really, honestly, extremely powerful devices that we have, it really does set up a divide in how we can access the internet and technology. Another population is able-bodied versus disabled individuals. So 27% of disabled adults have never used the internet. This statistic really shocked me. It just, for me in my life, it just seems like just an everyday part of my life. It seems like everybody, it's so easy, but that's because it's my experience. Many people do not have that experience, whether, they're unable to financially, whether they're unable to physically, or, there's a lot of reasons why people might not be able to access the internet. And it really puts disabled individuals at a disadvantage if they're unable to access the internet because it is such a big part of our lives. Wealthy versus poor. And I will talk about an intersection that plays into this as well, but 62% of households that make less than $30,000 use the internet. That's a huge group of people who does not have access to something that seems to be a part of our everyday life. They're missing out on news, they're missing out on, education, all of these things that we can keep talking about further into the presentation. But and another thing that plays into this, that the statistic doesn't necessarily specify is race. So because in our society, we know that there's a huge intersection between racial inequality and poverty. And when we have to consider both. So while race might not be the one specific thing that's keeping someone from accessing technology, we know that there's a huge issue in our society where our economic system is putting people at a disadvantage. And it's taking away the voice from people of color if they're unable to access the internet and put their voice out there, or, you know, access what's on there. You're taking a lot of that power away from them just by, you know, that intersection of race and wealth. And then another major thing is rural, I hate that word, rural versus urban. 75% of urban residents use the internet compared to 69% of rural residents. So, you know, I think a lot of us can easily imagine, like, you kind of get out in the country, the connection might not be as bad to the internet. But again, that's making them at a disadvantage for accessing the technology. The lowest amount of access worldwide, Pakistan has 15% access to the internet and technology. Ethiopia had 8% and Uganda had 11%. These countries are losing a lot of privileges by not being able to access this really important part of our life. And one thing that really shocked me about this as well was that 31% of the world doesn't even have 3G coverage, and 15% of the world does not have electricity. However, you look at a country like South Korea, where they're paying about half of what Americans are paying and getting much faster internet speed. They are obviously leaps and bounds ahead of us in some ways with technology, but it's just wild how different it is throughout the world, of how some people are really having a lot of access to internet and technology while others obviously are not. And that definitely puts a lot of people at a huge disadvantage because of this digital divide. Let me make sure I didn't skip a slide, I think. Okay, no, I didn't. Okay, here's some examples that apply to us specifically. So with K-12 education, students who have limited access to internet at home or come from families that are struggling to purchase devices. So think about the STEAM model of education for a minute. Huge part of that is technology. If we're in a STEAM school and these students who are attending are living in a home where they don't really have a lot of access to technology for either those financial reasons, or maybe their grown-ups don't have the time to help them with the technology, that's putting them at a disadvantage with their education because they're not being able to, you know, take access with that virtual learning. And obviously virtual learning has really grown a lot the last couple of years because of COVID. I know even this last year, my school in particular did not close for COVID related reasons, but because we were snowed in and iced in several times. And I personally had a lot of students that were never able to access our virtual learning while we were, you know, snowed in. And a lot of that was just, they just really didn't have either internet or people at home who could help them with the internet. I had a family whose parents only spoke Spanish and they could not read. So they couldn't even hardly access the virtual learning that we were doing at home. And that is severely impacting education as we're moving forward into this digital age of learning. Another thing is college. So I know that there's a button to do a reaction. I don't think I have access to it right now because I'm presenting, but if you kind of wiggle your mouse, you should be able to see reaction. You can pick any reaction you want, do a reaction. If you have ever had to submit or complete any assignment in a digital platform. So if you've ever had to use Blackboard, if you've ever had to use Google Classroom, even Microsoft Word or some sort of computer. Obviously, I mean, we're doing it now, but if you look at the participants, I can start to see people reacting because almost all of us, if not all of us, we went to college, we had to do Google Classroom, we had to type and do PowerPoints. If people are going to college there's an expectation at this point in time to have access to reliable technology and to have access to the internet. This is putting people who are economically disadvantaged at a huge disadvantage when it comes to getting a college education, because not everybody has access to that. And yes, you know, I know at UCA, I would see so many students in the library using the computers there, but maybe they have to work all the time and they're unable to go to the library until really late hours of the evening, or and that expectation of everyone must have technology is making it hard for people in college who don't have it. It's holding people back from networking as well. So think about LinkedIn. Job applications are mostly online these days. There are virtual internships that have come up because of COVID. And just, you know, things that seem to be a part of maybe our everyday lives are not everybody's experience. Let me look at this chat real quick.
Those that didn't have the reaction were just responding yes to having an online class.
Absolutely. See, and I love this, and we're going to talk about access and affordability shortly. Some implications, some major issues that come from this, which I have touched on briefly so far. Virtual learning, major issue for us as teachers. This is a statistic that I saw from the Close the Gap Foundation, which is working toward bridging this digital divide, is that during virtual learning, there was a 10 times less class engagement from children who were coming from homes with annual incomes of less than $25,000 a year. So really, that's a large population. And depending on what school you're at, it might be an even larger population. I was at a very high poverty school where this was a major issue, and it really doesn't impact the virtual learning experience. And like I said, this is becoming so normalized that now my school didn't even have snow days. Like, we just had virtual learning. It's become such an expectation and a part of our digital learning environment that we're in these days. And those kids are really missing out on so much. 42 million without internet. So that's just an estimation, but 42 million Americans are unable to purchase broadband internet due to financial, geographic, or service limitations. So that could be that rural living, not having access out where they are, or, you know, financial reasons. So in the United States, that's 1 in 4 students, which is 16 million K-12 students. And it's just crazy, because I know this is just such a big part of our lives at this point. So for them to be missing out on so much of their education, it's no wonder why we came back from virtual learning and post-pandemic, and we come back into the schools and have kids who are so far behind. Surveys are saying that 80% of American teachers believe that online learning improves education. But if kids are unable to access online learning, is it really improving it? At this point, having a computer, this is a quote, having a computer and internet service at home is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. It's an expectation at this point that many people are having without understanding, or maybe forgetting, just based on how it's so easy in our own lives to have internet be such a major part of it. I mean, we're on TikTok all the time, we're on social media, we're texting people, we're watching YouTube, we're on Netflix. All of these things are on the internet. And when that becomes so ingrained in your everyday life, maybe it's easy to forget that some people are not having that experience. And so to expect that they're able to participate in online learning, it's not always the case. So it's really important that we begin to close this divide. One major way we can do this, sorry, my computer just started wigging out a little, equal learning opportunities. So we're in a digital age of learning, but we want everybody to be able to access school. I mean, school should be a right for everyone. And if we're making it to, if we're having this barrier and this gap where kids and college students and just students are not able to learn, we're setting them up for a disadvantage. But when we do bridge this gap early on, I mean, you think if we start young, especially, we're setting students up for success in the long run by being able to access this learning, because in addition to, you know, having a good education in general, it sets people up for wider career options. Think about the booming jobs we have in technology. I mean, not only do we have so many remote work opportunities, even post-COVID, it's everywhere. You can still get remote jobs. On top of that, there's so many jobs in technology, especially with how much the industry is booming. There's more and more jobs in technology and more of a need for people who understand and can take the next step with technology. And we want that progress, but we want everyone to be able to pursue those jobs too. So we need to be closing that gap to provide people access to those jobs. Access to community, again, social media, connecting with others, family across the world, you know, friends who moved to another state, and just being able to be with others online. And think about, you know, when we were in quarantine, what if you didn't have access to, you know, social media and technology and weren't able to talk to anybody? I mean, I would have been miserable. This is such a big part of our lives, and it's important that everybody has access to it. And on top of that, the networking that comes with, you know, trying to get jobs. A lot of that really just is online at this point. And access to knowledge. So I'll be honest, a lot of people really are getting their news from Google, Facebook, TikTok even. You would hate that people are getting news from TikTok, but they are. And, you know, if people are unable to have access to the internet and technology, they could really be missing out on so much of what's going on in the world. Newspapers, physical newspapers are less of a thing. And so to be able to have access to everything that's going on in the world, and even just to Google, why are apples red? You know, like that is such a big part of our lives these days. So it's important that we begin to bridge this gap and make the internet and technology more accessible to everyone. So here are some solutions of how we can do that. So here's some things that are being done. If you go back, you know, to when, I hate saying so long ago, it doesn't really feel like that long ago, but 2001, and from now on, we've really seen technology boom even more. I mean, this phone did not really exist when I was born in 1998. And so we've come such a long way. It became apparent, and, you know, as we came into the 2000s, that there was more and more of a need for different task forces and stuff. So the UN, the United Nations, set up the Information and Communications Technology Task Force in 2001. And then in 2006, started World Information Society Day. These were major steps in the direction of progress for closing the gap and advocating for accessibility to technology and equity in technology. And as we've moved into this year, so this year, I don't know if y'all got any kind of email. I know I got an email about it. I know I saw people all over social media talking about it. The Biden-Harris administration created the Affordable Connectivity Program. And I will be sending a link to that in the chat after I get out of this presentation, because I think it's really beneficial. It provides a lot of people a more affordable way to have access to the internet. They've worked a lot with different internet providers throughout the country to make it more affordable for low-income families. So there is a website to see if you qualify and you can apply for it. And I can link that after this. Additionally, this is still a draft, but it's called Preventing Digital Discrimination in Broadband Access. So this is something that the U.S. Federal Communications Commission proposed just to continue to close the gap in this divide. But what can you do, not only as a teacher, but just as a person in this country and in this world? You have so much power. You are a leader in your everyday life. And even in your daily life, you might have people that you don't know don't have access to the internet. It's kind of embarrassing at this point in society to say that you don't have internet access, or you don't have the newest phone, or you don't have the newest computer, or you don't have a computer at all, because it's just so normalized. So look for opportunities to support the community. Maybe you can share your hotspot with somebody, or loan out your old devices, or just, donate things to different community partners where they can provide that technology to people who need it. Again, donating financially as well. So there are many organizations such as the Close the Gap Foundation that work with in different nonprofit efforts and government interventions to really make a difference in this. And then just learning and sharing. So people are not really aware of this, because again, it's so normalized in our life to just be on our phones all the time and just be on the internet 24/7. It's important that we're spreading awareness of what's going on, and spreading awareness in our schools as well of the fact that, we need to be making this accessible. Push to provide hotspots to your kids' families if they don't have internet. Reach out to, people in your school and see what else you can do to pull through for these families. There's a lot that you can do in particular to make a difference in this area. So I don't know if y'all had any questions. One thing I did want to share is this website. I don't know if you can still see it. I'll provide the link. This is Close the Gap Social Impact Fellowship. It's a summer program where upper high schoolers can find mentors and become more involved in the digital community. So it says, it's closed for now, but you could share this with people in your life. You could share this with your students in your school. And this has some really great opportunities for students from low-income families that just have really experienced a lot of growth from this opportunity. There are scholarships and just really good opportunities for all kinds of students. So I'll send this in the chat, but I don't know if y'all have questions.
Thank you, Caroline. If anyone has any questions, you can pop those in the chat. I just want to make a note that if we do go over the 2-hour time, I will adjust your PD certificate to however long we are in the session if you stay the entire time. If not, it will just be for the 2 hours. Caroline, are you going to also link your presentation and other resources? Okay. And I do know I was in a meeting with the Office of Educational Technology director, who is actually an acquaintance of mine. And there is part of this program that Caroline mentioned is about to trickle down to state level, and then money will be distributed out. And part of the clause of that is that the governor has to provide some of this money and allocate it for nonprofit organizations on top of school use. So hopefully that will help relieve some of our students in those rural areas and places that technology access, especially internet access, is difficult. All right, Justin, go ahead with your session.
All right, thank you, everybody. I put a couple links in the chat. The top one should be to my handout, and then it's got a link to a poll in there that if y'all want to go ahead and start on, you're more than welcome. 2, we'll try and cover that about midway through. I'm going to share my screen, make sure everything's working. Can y'all see the presentation?
Yes, you're good.
Okay. So in the 1960s, a famous architect by the name of Selwyn Goldsmith designed the first sidewalk ramp or curb cut out to allow people in a wheelchair to have access to city sidewalks. This, of course, was a much bigger movement led by the disability advocates towards universal access in public buildings. This started happening by changing policies, systems, and laws to promote full inclusion of the building. And we even did this process in our public schools. If y'all will take a second, put in chat if you remember any of these mandatory changes happening in your school, or when you were a student in schools. I remember actually moving schools, I think, due to some of these laws. But we can give credit to Ronald Mace for this term, universal design. He said, universal design is built on a core belief that we should design environments to be used by all people without the need of adaptation or specialized design. Here's an example of a last minute quick fix versus a well thought out design, which we would consider universal. And then this inclusion approach allows everyone to benefit from such designs. This way, parents pushing strollers benefit from curb cutouts. And similarly, viewers that use closed captioning on videos, regardless of their hearing, does anyone here prefer to use closed captioning all the time when they're watching Netflix or anything at home? Y'all can put that in the chat as well. This way, in other words, when you design for everyone, everyone benefits from the design. And so universal design of learning uses the same principles of universal design and applies it to each part of learning, from learning spaces to the materials to instructions and assessment to classroom culture and behavior management. So built around the cognitive neuroscience, UDL is an inclusive educational framework that seeks to remove barriers while also keeping the learning challenging for all students. So it just helps them break those barriers down. And a UDL approach includes a paradigm shift. And so this is from a deficit mindset to neurodiversity, and from singular accommodations to universally accessible scaffolds and support. Also, it moves from a teacher-centered view to more of a student-centered approach, centered on student activities. And in the 1990s, Dr. David Rose and the Center of Applied Special Technology, or CAST, articulated these 3 UDL principles. Number 1, the multiple means of engagement, which focuses on the effective network or the why of learning. Number 2, multiple means of representation, which focuses on the recognition network or the what of learning. Number 3, the multiple means of action and expression, which focuses on the strategic networks or the how of learning. So what does this actually look like in the classroom? Well, there is not a set perspective way, but there are some ideas that I'm going to try and share here. One of them that I've actually had some experience with is using the flipped classroom. And so using a flipped classroom approach can be an easy way to start, employing UDL, where more time is spent doing classroom activities in class versus lecturing or taking in class content. And if y'all have started the survey I put in there from Poll Anywhere, you'll actually kind of get a feeling of what it feels like to be a student that has to make some of those choices in a classroom. And it will demonstrate one of the second or third choices will demonstrate what it feels like to be in a flipped classroom, getting a chance to look over the material, and instead of having that pressure that a lot of us feel in class to read, you know, a 500-word quick, short summary and then have to do something with it in class. Students are presented with this prior to the class and have an opportunity to, you know, some students need to watch it 4 times. Some students may only need to watch it 1 time. And so it gives them that equal opportunity to learn no matter their abilities or disabilities. Let's see, when it comes to the why of learning, teachers can focus on the student interest, activities, and what really motivates them. And this helps student direction, and it starts with student choice. This might include choice menus like the one we used in our bonus opportunity Ms. Cooksey provided us. They can also pursue their choice activity or question with an inquiry-based learning project. This can lead to a sense of ownership and can help promote student self-regulation. Students can see the big picture and reflect on their learning. You know, a lot of times some of these individual projects are only given to gifted students or students in an AP setting, and, you know, everyone can benefit from those opportunities. When it comes to the what students learn, we can provide learners multiple methods of accessing the learning content. This might include multiple font sizes, closed captioning, text-to-speech technology, or the ability to change speed in audio and video. An example would be to incorporate graphic organizers to help process information, as well as providing slideshows prior to the lesson. And I gave some resources in the handout as well, where there's actually some resources for finding closed captioning for Zoom, YouTube, Word, and as well as PowerPoint. And I'm hoping it's popping up closed captioning as I speak in PowerPoint, which is a neat feature I learned through this process. When it comes to how students learn, we can provide learners with multiple methods for demonstrating what they are learning. This might include flexibility on timing and due dates for assignments and projects, but it also might mean more time to think or more opportunities for pacing or for practice during a lesson. So we can provide calendars and pacing guides that break down tasks for students. We can provide choices for the methods students use to solve problems or the media format for their finished products. Universal design for learning embraces the diversity of all learners so that all students are empowered to become self-directed problem solvers and lifelong learners. And so I've got a copy of some of those resources I was talking about there, and then my references. And then let me see if I have time to share our poll. We had 12 respondents, looks like, and I just want to see if we got the feedback I was hoping for. So for class 1, everyone 100%, yes, that's what I was hoping. Everyone was stressed, right? They felt like class 1, they were put on the spot. And then for class 2, I was hoping to get some varied responses, and that's what we were looking at. Everybody had a different style of learning in a way that was appropriate for them, that they enjoyed probably to have a choice. And then it made, how did this choice make it? It still made some feel stressed, but most felt happy. That's what we were looking for. Class number 3, we had our varied choice, and then it made everyone happy. So this class 3 was what I was talking about, giving an example of kind of what a flipped classroom would be like. And hopefully that's an easy example that everyone can try and employ in their classroom after this presentation. Thank y'all so much. If y'all have questions, please let me know.
All right, if you have any questions for Justin, you're welcome to pop into the chat or just ask verbally.
I popped a question into the chat that he can respond to whenever he has time, because I don't want to take anybody's time for him to verbally answer. So,
okay, great. I saw that too, Devin. I was hoping you mentioned that. All right, Beth is up. Beth, are you hearing us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. I think
That's
okay. It started lagging a little bit right when I'm going to present.
Of course.
In the chat, I put a link. If you guys could click it and get into my Peer Deck, I would love that so that you can participate. And I will share my screen here. Okay. Can you guys see my screen now?
We've got it on half a screen.
Okay. Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, there we go. It's expanded.
Okay. So my presentation, I chose social media as my topic, and it was really hard to pick where I wanted to go with it, but I wanted to talk about how to use social media to develop a personal learning network. So if you guys could draw a check on the platforms that you frequently use for social media.
Okay, are we marking
this could
that
just
we
be
use for consumption, or
yes,
that we use?
Can you do that in the Peer Deck?
Yeah, I can draw in there.
It would be in the, yeah, okay.
I just didn't know if you were focused on consumption or if we create on that, because I will watch TikTok videos all night, but I am not about to make one.
Yeah, just anything that you use, if you create or just consume. All right, and oh, hang on, let me go back. I wanted to show you the responses. So it looks like all of you have social media and you're using various different platforms. So the next question I have for you is going to require you to drag some numbers in. Drag number 1 if you don't use social media in your professional life. So drag 1 to I don't. And then the other ones, I want you to put like number 1 with the one that you use it the most, say to engage with stakeholders. If that's what you use it for, put a 1 there, and just kind of put those in order of how you use them. So the options are engage with stakeholders, personal learning networks, professional learning communities, to create content with students, and to create content for educators. How are you using? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. There, that should make it go back. I'm sorry. So I think to use this for a professional learning community, to use social media would be a little bit hard, but I actually do kind of, I'm in a group that we could use social media because we actually do use common assessment. So that may be a little bit hard, but I wanted to show you the responses too. So we're all over the place here. I see a lot of you have put that you don't. Well, I guess 3 of you have put 4 maybe. And then a lot of you use it for personal learning networks, which I'm really happy that you are doing that, because I have a challenge for you if you're already doing that. And then I have a challenge for those of you who are not doing that. So I'm going to go to the next slide, and that will, sorry, not let you finish that. So in our digital leadership book, Eric Sheninger wrote, "I swore I would never be on social media as I didn't have the time for it, and it would not help me professionally. Boy, was I wrong." This is so crazy to me that he ever thought this, and then he wrote a book on digital leadership. So it's really interesting how powerful it is. So what is a personal learning network? It's a collection of like-minded people with whom one exchanges information and engages in conversation. I really think of it more as like a community, not just where you're taking things, but also engaging with people. So why would we use social media to build up our personal learning network? There's the stats of the percent of people who are on social media. And I just think about, if as a biology teacher, how many biology teachers I can connect with if I use social media, because in my own school, that would be 0% of other people, because there's no other biology teachers, but in the world, there's a lot of biology teachers, and I connect with them on Facebook groups mostly. So the personal learning network, in Daniel Pink's book, Drive, he talks about motivation 3.0, and he says to really be motivated, we need autonomy. And I don't know about y'all, but as a teacher, I don't get a lot of autonomy. I mean, I can't even use the bathroom when I need to. I can't choose the professional learning that I want to go to. If I do, it's just on top of what I'm required to. So developing my own personal learning network has given me some autonomy. And then, of course, mastery is going to be a part of that personal learning network, because I'm talking with teachers from all different walks of life, and they share resources and answer questions and just really inspire me. And of course, we all have a purpose. The purpose part is just that you want to serve something greater than yourself. And I think that that's what we do as educators. So if we build this personal learning network, maybe it'll push us and motivate us, especially at a time that so many teachers are having a hard time and are leaving the profession. So I won't read all of this. This is part of our book. But why we need a personal learning network. And Sheninger gives us 10 reasons. And one of the most important ones for myself is that it removes silos. I like to call these islands, but I'm on my own little island. I'm the only teacher, a biology teacher, an AP biology teacher in my school. And so it's really hard to share resources with anyone else in my school building, but on social media, I can. So in some, now that I've moved, I can't read the names. Okay, Odin, Hughes, and Lupton, they wrote a paper called Teachers as Connected Professionals, and it was a model to support professional learning. And I really loved this. The personal learning network is linking because it links us to others who are teaching within some similar roles. And that connection can provide us information and inspiration. It stretches us because with the connections, we have lots of different teachers and from education, including commercial stakeholders, and that can provide us support, feedback, and encouragement. And then it can also be amplifying because of all of those diverse connections that we're making. They go beyond teaching and education, and that can provide us a lot of inspiration and also just enhance our learning experience as well, and for students. So I would like for you guys to drop some of your favorite follows in the chat on TikTok. I just put a couple of people from Arkansas. I am that English teacher. Her name is Claudine James. She has 3.7 million followers on TikTok, and she gives grammar rules, y'all. It's so crazy. I hope you guys have seen her, and if you haven't, you should look her up. Also, Sir Tyler Tarver, he is an educational leader. I think he was an administrator. I don't know that he is anymore. On Instagram, and I would say on all of these platforms. Just search for whatever your content area is. Also on Facebook, that's the one I use the most. Facebook groups are really, really beneficial to me. I really like AP Biology. I think it's National AP Biology Teachers. I joined that, and they even have a Google Drive where people just share their resources, and y'all, people are just really, really giving. And I know a lot of us are on Teachers Pay Teachers, but I would say that if you make these connections in Facebook groups, you can get a lot of things for free. You don't have to pay for them. I've had even from a Facebook group that I'm in, somebody shared their whole Schoology class. And that was just really, really beneficial to me. And it helps us not reinvent the wheel. On LinkedIn, I follow a lot of people that are in tech. And then of course on Twitter, you can follow those hashtags and participate in like conversations. I don't do that a lot, but some people really enjoy that. Okay. So for those of you who are already doing this, been there, done that, my challenge to you is to create. So how do you start? You pick a platform, introduce yourself. A lot of us just consume, but if, you know, I would just challenge you to start to be creators. We want our students to be content creators. So I would challenge you to do what we would like our students to do as well. So if you choose to do like a video like TikTok, just treat it like FaceTime. If you choose something like LinkedIn, it's more associated with like photos, I think. I would say it is. Some people may disagree. Just post a headshot and say hi, introduce yourself, and that can turn into opportunity for you, opportunities for your students. So be authentic, add value to what's already there. And then a lot of people say, you know, to build up your brand, be consistent. And the key is to make videos of what you like and what you know, and that can lead to opportunity. As Sheninger shows us, that when we have this professional learning and growth, we'll have communication. It can lead to a brand for us, and that can lead to opportunity. So let's meet up. I think that this should work if you're in the Pear Deck, and then I will drop the link to this too. I wanted for us to create kind of a PLN here where we can get together and follow each other on social media. So what I did is I put in dates above. If you guys scroll down, or you could add it to this. That's a good idea too. I didn't even think about us all typing in the same place. But if you'll scroll down and go to your birth month, that would be great. Do y'all see what I mean? So if you were born in July, go down. And if anybody's birthday is today, happy birthday. Mine is coming up soon. I'm going to be old, like the age that I thought was old, you know? So anyway, I hope you guys will join me in there. And I just wanted to show you my references for joining. Do you have any questions?
All right, thank you, Beth. You may consider turning it off where it's presenter led so people can go back and finish adding in their social media stuff.
Yeah, I will. Let's see.
All right, great. And Stephen is up. I see he's popping some resources in the chat too. And Kim did say in the chat that social media can be so time consuming, and I think you have to choose your limits with how much time you want to spend, or dedicate only certain times of the day for that. All right, Stephen, you are up and good to go.
Okay, let me get to, there we are, hang on just a second. I'm done with that. And then I'm going to, okay, can everybody see my screen? Let me
no,
go
it's
back.
not pulled up yet.
See presentation. Okay, I thought it was. Let me see, window. Let me do.
Whenever it gives me all of those choices, I'm like, I don't know which one it's on.
Yeah, yeah. Let me see. Entire screen. Sorry. Dang, I thought I had it. Give me. Yeah, this is Chrome tab. There we go.
All right, now you've got it pulled up there. I see that you're unmuted, but you've lost sound, I think. If you need me to present from my computer and just walk through the slides, and you can tell me when to change, we can do that too. Oh, I think we just lost Stephen. I'm sorry, I've had myself unmuted and clicking so I could pull things up, and I know y'all are probably tired of hearing that click, click sound. Oh. Stephen, I can see you, but I can't hear you. You've lost sound. No, we've got your presentation back up, but I can't hear you. We can move on to Devin if you want to troubleshoot what's going on. Okay.
Okay. I was just about to pop in and offer that. Let me go ahead and start my camera. Okay. Ooh, the lighting is not as ideal as I'd hoped. Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm gonna go ahead. No, yeah. I'll go ahead and get started, and he can just, that'll give him time to kind of fix whatever issues he's having.
All right, thank you.
No, not a problem. So I'm going to go ahead and share mine. Okay.
I'm just curious. Can y'all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I think I fixed it. But go.
Well, I'm good either way. So.
You go ahead.
Okay. So can we see? I'm going to go ahead and present. So my presentation is over student privacy law. So it's titled What's with All the Acronyms? Because we all know we've seen FERPA and COPPA and SEPA, and what are they, what do they mean, and why are they important? And I want to talk about what they are, understand why they're set in place, and why they're important to us as technology leaders. So I want to start off by going ahead and having people pop into the chat and talking. My question is when you think of, what comes to mind when you think of student privacy laws? So what immediately comes to mind? What are some things that you think of? Anything is good. So just anything that comes to mind. And I will come check those out in just a second, but I'm going to keep on rolling. Okay, so I want to start off with FERPA. It's the one we're probably most used to hearing. It's the one we hear a lot. It's the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. And what it does is it provides privacy of education records and provides access of those records to parents. It was originally passed in '74. It's been amended several times since the early 2000s because of the need to keep up with the technology demand. And it specifically applies to schools, whether they be K-12 schools or colleges or universities who receive funds from the U.S. Department of Education. So if it's a school that's not receiving federal funding, they're not necessarily under the FERPA law. They don't have to necessarily follow these rules. And something else that's interesting is it protects children. It's primarily to protect children, but however, it does extend to higher education. And it also, once you turn 18, a student turns 18, or they move up to higher education, they are in control of the protections that they are given. So they have all control. For example, I remember when I started undergrad right out of high school, I had to put my parents' information on my stuff to give them access to be able to have any information about what was going on in my education. So for them to, pay my tuition, they had to have access, and I had to grant them that access. It was given to me. What it basically is it provides access to students' records. So anything that schools put regarding education records, and some of those examples of some of those records may be grades, transcripts, class lists, discipline, any discipline files or discipline issues, any schedules, health records if you're K-12, and financial records if you are in the college age. And those are the kinds of education records that this law protects. As a parent or a person in charge of your education records, you have the right to seek to have them amended as well. So if there is a disconnect and you don't believe that their records are adequate or accurate, you can ask them to be amended. And if for some reason there's still a disagreement, you have the right to take them to a hearing and kind of fight it out that way to make sure that your information as presented through your education records is accurate. Parents and individuals also have the right to control some of their personal information from education records. So personal information, things like your name, your phone number, things like that. So they can control what information is in the educational records of their personal information. And probably most importantly, schools have to have written permission before they can disclose any of the educational records. There are some minor exceptions in the category of directory information, and that is kind of classified as, so your directory information, that's your name, your phone number, attendance, things like that. And they are allowed to disclose those without written permission. However, those have to be set in a policy that the parents are given beforehand. And if they still opt out, they can still opt out of you presenting that just that directory information. So why is this important? What does it mean for technology leadership? So first of all, we've got to understand that in technology leadership, students are constantly on different sites and things that we're advocating for them. And it's very important that we, as educators and technology leaders, are communicating that the information, the types of information that websites utilize in our classroom are collecting. So parents have the right to not want that information shared. So we need to be really cognizant about informing parents ahead of time before we put potential information out there so that they have the opportunity to, yes. Okay, sorry, I just saw some chats pop up. All of that is really good. Test scores, library books, love that. So to make sure that they're aware of the information that's being put out there, because they have the right for you to not disclose some of that information. Also, digital tools that we use make their own form of records. Parents must have access to those things. So if you are working with a student and you put any of their personal education, so any of their grades or anything in a website, they are required to know, and they're required to have access to it, and they're required to tell you that if they don't want this on there, that you have to take it off. So also just overall protecting their records. We are responsible for their records and everything about these students. And with technology, there's so many ways for people who don't need it to gain access to it. And it's our responsibility as technology leaders to protect these records that we could be potentially putting online for these students. So our next, let's see. There it goes. Okay, so our next slide is COPPA, and this one's really big. It's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. This one was passed in 2000. It was revised in 2013. Once again, constantly revising these laws because of the growth in technology. This specifically protects children under the age of 13. So 13 and up are not protected under this law. And basically, it's providing parents control over the information that is collected on websites. So with that being said, it specifically applies to website operators or online services that are directed towards children. However, if a website or an online learning service or an online service in general is aware that they are catering to children in any way, if they know children are on their site, they're required also to follow the COPPA laws. If they have any reason to believe that children are accessing their site, they must follow the COPPA laws. Also, this is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. So not your typical Department of Ed things that you would typically see, because this isn't really, this isn't specifically for schools. This is more for the information that's being put out there. So if you come across a website or an online service that you feel like isn't meeting those COPPA regulations, the Federal Trade Commission is kind of who handles all of that, who addresses those concerns and kind of looks into it. Also, so here's some things that are protected under COPPA. So first of all, personal information is, going back to here, I forgot to. So when they say personal information of a student, the things that they're specifically referring to are things like their name, their address or location data, their emails, usernames, phone numbers, photos. All of these things are protected under COPPA. And if they are catering to students in any ways, there are very strict protocols in place. For example, if you follow under this bracket, you are required to post policies for data collection. So every website that caters to children or children have access to, they post policies. They have to have a private policy that lists all of their policies for how they collect data, and parents have to have access to that. Before they can collect that data on children, they have to have permission from the parent. So if you've ever logged onto a website for your child and it makes you put in your age and your information and all of that before your child can get on to play, that's why. because they want to know that you are giving them permission to get on this website. And in a lot of times that is the permission that they need to be able to collect the data that they're using. Whatever data they are collecting, that must be disclosed to parents. It must be. So then parents also have the right to say, you know what, I don't want that information out there. I'm taking it back. I don't want it on there anymore. And they're required to delete it. There's also a limit to what they can collect. They can't go very far out of the normal scope of personal information to be able to access information on the student. So that's very limited. They have to stay in a very small window of what they can collect. And that kind of varies. There's a little bit more specificity if you really look into the regulations. So also, and probably most importantly, with COPPA, they are required to protect any personal information that they gathered. It is their responsibility to make sure that any information that they gathered is protected and is not going somewhere unsafe. Something I wanted to kind of show you, I put a link on here, but I realized earlier when I was piloting this that it won't just pop up in a screen share. So I'm actually going to switch to, I'm switching to a website. Let me pop over there. Let me see. I'm gonna share this one. And so we're all pretty familiar with PBS Kids. It's a very common website that is catered to children, obviously. So I just kind of wanted to give you an example and show you how or where you can find privacy policies under COPPA that regard the protection of children. So for example, this is the web page. If in this case, if you scroll all the way down, privacy policy right here. And when you click it, it has all the information. If it's going to load, it's being awfully slow. Okay, so it mentions that it was last modified about a year ago, or about 2 years ago, excuse me. So it references what information they collect, which is under COPPA law. It tells them what they don't collect. It's how they use the information. It's how do they share that and who they share it with. And it also talks about how they collect it. And then information regarding parental consent, access, and deletion is putting all of this out there for parents so that they know exactly what information they're getting from their children, how they're using it, and what they can do to prevent that. And that's going to be, you should, if they're following COPPA law, should be able to find that on any website generated towards children. So back to, okay, so beyond this, why is this important in technology leadership? Well, here's the thing. Even though COPPA doesn't apply directly to schools, and it doesn't, we use a lot of these sites and learning skills within the digital community. So with that being said, we're responsible for them as well. So in a lot of cases, because we're utilizing this technology through our schools and in our classrooms, we become intermediaries. So we're responsible because we're the ones putting them on these sites, we're responsible for making sure that understanding what data is being collected, how it's being collected, how it's being protected. And we've got to do our part along with the parents who have these rights to make sure that these students aren't accessing things that they shouldn't, that they aren't putting in dangerous information out there for people who really don't have any business having it. And that's our job. And we also need to make sure that back to the FERPA thing, that we have consent for using these websites. Because if a child or a parent of a child genuinely does not want their child using a website because they don't like the data collection policies, then that's our responsibility to find an alternative, because that's a parent's right to not have children subjected to certain policies or data collection. And so as an educator, we need to make sure that we're using this law wisely and applying it to our classroom in a way that protects our kids. Oh, did it go? Okay. Next, we're moving on to SIPA, which is the Children's Internet Protection Act. This one was passed in 2000. It was amended in 2011. Once again, they're constantly amending these. So this one is it's a little more straightforward and a little more not so strict, I guess, because this is a law that requires schools and libraries to adopt internet security policies. That's all it is. You have to have a policy about internet security. However, if you're a school, most schools and libraries, in fact, many, are part of what's called the E-rate program. And that is a program through the government, through the federal government, that provides federal funding to schools and libraries that help make certain technologies. So talk about certain technologies and internet access that makes these more accessible, that, you know, it helps the affordability of it and provides more access to children. So if you're part of that E-rate program, you're required to follow SIPA. If you are not under that umbrella, then you're not required to follow SIPA, although it's still highly encouraged. So SIPA policies are required. You usually find these in an acceptable use policy of sorts. And I'm going to show you in a minute my school's acceptable use policy and how they've implemented the SIPA regulations within their acceptable use policies. So you have to have policies on minors accessing inappropriate material. They have to have policies on safety using electronic communication, so email or messaging of any kind where they're communicating electronically. There has to be a safety measure regarding that. Hacking is big. They make hacking a big deal because the last thing that they want is to go to all these measures to protect students, and then students are now inflicting some kind of danger upon others in the form of hacking. So, you know, whatever that entails. So that one's a really big one. Hacking is a really big one. Also, a big policy is there has to be a policy about how the disclosure of personal information. So how any person, how personal information is presented. There has to be a policy, especially of a minor. So if there's a minor that you're in your school or in your library that's accessing technology, you have to have a policy about how to disclose, if and how and when you disclose their personal information. And that kind of also ties back into the COPPA laws. And most importantly, probably there has to be a process in the SIPA policy located in the acceptable use policy that restricts access to unauthorized websites. So things that are inappropriate, things that are dangerous, things of that nature. So I'm going to go ahead and switch on over to back to, and I'm going to show you an example of a policy. Where did it go? Okay, so this is at the end of my school's acceptable use policy, and it says compliance with the requirements of SIPA. And what it goes on to say is it has specific measures for technology protection. It has specific measures for accessing inappropriate material. It has ways that we prevent that, blocking of certain websites, things of that nature, and it has all of that information labeled. Inappropriate network usage. This is where a lot of the hacking comes in, things like that. Also, this is where the electronic communications comes in, so using those things appropriately, and it really lays it out very point blank. So then you have, we have some other policies that are, that are part of SIPA. They just go into a little bit more detail. So the supervision and monitoring, and that's part of the protection aspect. There's the cyberbullying policy, things of that nature. And then it even goes on to have consequences for violations. So these are all parts of our policies at my school that follow the compliance of SIPA. Okay, and then most importantly, why is this important in technology leadership? Because acceptable use policies are so vital, and providing those policies for the SEPA regulations within them are very important to keeping our students safe while using technology in an educational setting. We've got to be cognizant about updating those school policies, keeping up with the times, making sure, because when they originally passed this law, cyberbullying wasn't really a thing, but it is now. So those are things that need to be included. Those are things that need to be added on, and using SEPA in your acceptable use policies is a really big way to get there. Also, we need to be implementing more internet safety programs. Using this, knowing how this affects students, we need to be implementing more safety programs. So your more digital footprint or digital citizenship learning for your students, better access to programs that are actively blocking websites that are dangerous or unsafe for students to be in. Really, it's our job as educators to truly protect these students, and as technology leaders to protect these students. And by following the SEPA laws put in place, that's a really huge, big step to getting where we need to be to protect these students. And yeah, I think that's it. I wanted to show you one more. Let me pop back in. I wanted to show you one more quick thing. I uncovered a really fun resource called I Keep Safe. That is in my resources. It's in my resources for my presentation. So if you want to go check out the website, I highly recommend it. But this is really interesting. This is a really interesting piece of information. And these I'll also link. I've uploaded in the discussion, but I'll definitely link them in the chat here in just a moment. These are all, this is specifically how to use FERPA in the education setting. And there's a lot of really awesome information here. And I'm not going to take up much of your time with this. You are more than welcome to go through and read this, but it's got a lot of good information. It references FERPA and COPPA and how to use those in the classroom and what we need to do as educators to keep our children safe. And additionally, just I Keep Safe is a fantastic, fantastic resource for privacy and protection of technology, of students using technology. So I highly recommend. So yeah, any questions? Stephen, I love that. I love that data collected. So I'm glad I set you up to be able to present yours.
Great, thank you, Devin. If anyone has any questions, they can pop those in the chat. And I remember using I Keep Safe way back for Faux Paw, which is a cat, and his internet adventures. And one of the videos we used to watch cracked me up because it was Faux Paw meets the First Lady, and it was Barbara Bush. And so none of the students know who that is. But it cracks me up because that's how old these videos are to teach internet safety and digital citizenship for younger students. You can find them on YouTube now or the I Keep Safe website.
Definitely recommend. It was very interesting to me.
So I've titled my presentation, There's No Turning Back, What Everyone Needs to Know About Big Data and Artificial Intelligence. That's kind of a provocative title, but when I'm done with this presentation, hopefully you'll understand why I called it that. Okay, and you can go on to the next one. You may have to click a couple of times, I apologize. Okay, artificial intelligence. What images come to your mind when you hear that term? So go ahead and write some things down in the chat. On the handout, I had a place if you wanted to draw pictures, but enter some things in the chat and we'll see what kind of ideas we come up with. Let me see. More. Yes, computers taking over the world. Creepy movie, robots. Yes, all of those are Blade Runner. All of those are very good examples. iRobot, perfect. So if you go to the next screen, so some of you, like I said, probably came up with images like this. Machine learning, that is part of it. So this image right here is kind of the Hollywood version that a lot of you are referring to. In reality, it's a little bit more crude than that. If you'll go into the next screen for me, please. Okay, and so before we dive into the formal definition of artificial intelligence, I'm going to give you some examples of what artificial intelligence really is. So the other day, my mom was wearing an iWatch. And she was talking to my dad about needing to get a new car because hers has a whole lot of miles on it. It's had some troubles. And so the next day she was going through her Facebook stream, and all of a sudden all these ads for new cars came up. So that's an example of artificial intelligence. If you'll click on the next one, I wanted you guys to think of any similar examples, if you'll enter that into the chat. Anything you've experienced like that? One thing, another example is like when I was writing one of my papers, or all of my papers, so Google has Smart Compose now, which, right, exactly, medical. So Google has Smart Compose now, and it's way more advanced than autofill. Like when I was, it's not like, and so forth, like to fill it in. It's like when I was typing one of my papers, I was typing like the word equity and then the word citizenship came up. So that's how far advanced artificial intelligence has become. So in reality, like I said, it's a little bit more crude than that. So if you'll go ahead and click again, we'll talk about the definition. So what happens is algorithms are embodied in machines and they're used to carry out tasks that would normally require human involvement or intelligence. And if you'll go on to the next slide, I'll talk about what algorithms are specifically. So what an algorithm is, it's a set of rules a machine, especially a computer, follows to achieve a goal. So algorithms are coded into computers, and so they know how to solve a problem or how to go on to the next step and how to use all the data that's being collected on them, okay? So if you go on to the next one, let's talk, there's a branch of artificial intelligence called machine learning, and that's where computers can actually write their own algorithms. You don't have to program them in there. They actually write their own algorithms based on the data that they've been processed, that's been processed. Exactly, right, and that's all using artificial intelligence, your phone recognizing faces. So that, that definition came from David Spiegelhalter. He wrote a book called The Art of Statistics, which is extremely informative. And Popular Science said the book should be required reading by everyone. As a math teacher, I would agree, but I know not all of you would take the time to do that, okay? If you'll go ahead and go on to the next slide. So how does artificial intelligence work? Okay, we can go on to the next one. It depends on data, tons and tons of data. Forget samples and sample sizes. Like if you've ever studied data before and data analysis, you have a population, and then from that population, you take a sample, which may be like 100 or so people, and then you try to draw a conclusion based on that smaller sample, notice trends among the entire population. So instead of looking at sample sizes, you're looking at millions and millions of bits of data that are coming in. So you're looking at the whole population, not just a smaller sample size. So if we'll go on to the next one. So this is called big data. So data has been used to pair correlation in the past. For instance, like you can compare like how X is related to Y, for instance, like the hotter it is, the more money I'm spending on my electric bill because of my air conditioning. So there's a direct correlation there. If it's hotter, I'm spending more money for my air conditioning. And that's basically what linear regression does. But in this era of big data, it's become even more important to notice those correlations, like, oh, they've mentioned buying a car, so now I'm going to put an ad on Facebook, and that might make them want to go buy a new car from one of these advertisements. So if you go on to the next one, there's one more point here. So they've allowed us to collect exponentially more data than ever before. Okay, so let's look and see how artificial intelligence has been used in the past. So you can go on to the next one. So how does all the data affect AI is what we call it. So if you'll move on to the next slide, and you can click through some of these bullet points as I'm going through. In the mid 80s, they began to develop a computer that was going to go up against a human playing chess. And if you're of my generation, you may remember that very well. So IBM took over this after a few years, and they called their computer Deep Blue. And what happened was Deep Blue went up against the world chess champion, Kasparov, in 1996. Kasparov won. And then if you click onto the next one, there was a rematch in 1997. In that case, Deep Blue won, and chess has not been the same ever since. In fact, a human hasn't beat a computer in chess in more than 15 years. So if you go into the next slide, I'm going to explain how Deep Blue was able to win. According to a recent article on NPR, our brain can process 11 million bits of information per second. And Deep Blue was able to, if you go into the next little bit there, Deep Blue was able to process 200 million different chess positions per second. And so what it was doing is it was looking at probability and forecasting what the next move would be made by Kasparov, and then making its move based on that. So all of this data that was programmed in a computer affected all of those different things. If you go on to the next slide. So how does this affect us now? Well, data is being collected on us. Data is being collected about us all the time. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's kind of like Big Brother in Orwell's 1984. But instead of Big Brother watching us, it's corporations. If you go into the next slide. So we've got all these companies, Walmart, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, tons more, collecting data on us, millions of bits of data throughout every day of the year. So on the next slide, I've got an example of Amazon. So if we look at how Amazon collects our data, they collect data on previous searches, purchases, our wish list, even how long your cursor has hovered over an item. So depending on how many seconds that you've been hovering over an item, Amazon takes that into account as well. So this helps them to use algorithms to determine what distribution center to ship an item to. So if you're thinking about buying a book, okay, it looks at the data and says, maybe we need to ship that book to a distribution center near this person so we can have it to them within a couple of days. All right. Another example is Walmart. They look at weather forecasts. And a professor that was speaking to me at the University of Arkansas this summer was talking about, like, they've analyzed all the pandemic buying habits. So next time we have a pandemic, if we do, they'll know exactly what to ship to their stores. So they'll be prepared. Okay. If we go into the next one. So what artificial intelligence is not yet, it can give us insight to information, but they're not expected to have imagination or superhuman skills. And Spiegelhalter quoted that in his book. All right, so let's go into the next thing. Let's talk about the future of artificial intelligence. So here, I've got the Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger. If you're from my generation, you understand, you've seen this movie. He's a cyborg, part man, part machine. So by the end of this, we'll talk more about that. If you'll go on to the next slide. So there was an Israeli professor, Harari, that spoke at the World Economic Forum in 2018. And he was talking about the importance of data and data collection. So this is a very provocative quote. It stands out to me very strong. Those who control the data control the future. Data is the most important asset in the world. He compared it to gold, real estate. That's how important it is right now. Okay, if we look at the next slide. So data, the future of data storage, right now they're using DNA and they're mimicking data storage using DNA. DNA is the most efficient way to store data that we know of. And if you go into the next slide, I'll show you why DNA is such an efficient way of storing data. Our genetic code is millions of times more efficient at storing data than current solutions. And this to me stood out like I couldn't believe it. You could get rid of all the hard drives and storage devices in the world right now and store all that information in just a couple of 100 pounds of DNA. So that's how efficient DNA is at storing data. So if you look at the next slide, this is where it gets kind of creepy. So what this could lead to, engineers all over the world are already working on mimicking DNA to store data. Professor Petitz at the University of Arkansas, this is his area of research, and I talked to him this summer about that. Next step, Harari and others believe this could lead to the hacking of human beings. Privacy could be a thing of the past. And the last slide, some speculate that humans as we know them may not exist in 200 years because our DNA could be hacked by scientists and engineers. Okay. So if you go on to the next slide, what does this mean for our schools? What it means is our students need to be very aware of what's going on around them. How is data being collected related to them? How is it being used? If you'll go ahead and click the next part. And many may not pursue jobs in the computer programming field, but they are going to be exposed to data. And they're going to have data collected on them incessantly. It pretty much is already now. So simply exposing them to how artificial intelligence works and what machine learning is, that's a start in the right direction. And then finally, for our students and for our staffs, teaching them programming languages that are used to process data like Python. I'll be using it next fall for a research project I'm working on with my students in collecting and analyzing data. Python is one of the most prominent programming languages for analyzing data, collecting and analyzing data. So if we could teach our students those skills, that would give them a major leg up in the corporate world going forward. All right, so that covered it. I tried to be as concise as I could because I do value your time. And my email address is on there, rbonds@bentonvillek12.org. And as Arnold would say in The Terminator, hasta la vista, baby. All right, and I have my resources on the final slide. All right, 1 second, let me get back. Can y'all hear me now?
Yeah.
I can't hear you though, I need to, hang on, I'm sorry.
Great, if anyone has any questions while he's working on his sound issues, you can pop them in the chat.
There you go. I can hear you now. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, yep, we've got you back.
Okay. Very good. Does anybody have any questions? Whoops, I don't know what that is.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to our next person. And since we are running over, if you stay for 2 hours, your PD certificate will be for 2. But if you stay for our next few people, I'm going to adjust the time on the PD certificate to match whatever comes out of the next few people that present and however long we are on here. All right, Madison, you are up.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Let me get my screen.
And we can see your screen. Oh, there you go. I was going to say you were on the booklet
Sorry,
tab
that
instead
thing
of the
was
slide
in my
deck.
way and I couldn't get up there. Okay, so I'm going to teach y'all about a tech tool that you can use in your classroom. And this can work if you teach elementary all the way up to high school. I'm in a high school setting and we use this all the time. And the way that I was introduced to this, my teacher next door, I heard her kids like having so much fun in there. And so I went over and I was like, what are y'all doing in here? And so she was like, it's Blooket. You've got to play it with your kids. And so she taught it to us over the summer. And it's a really good tool. And so I really suggest you just trying it out and using it in your classroom. So I'm going to go through all the ins and outs of it for you guys. Okay, so what is Blooket? If you hear that word, you're probably like, what the heck is that? So it's kind of like Kahoot. And if you are somebody who's a little bit burnt out on Kahoot, and I know a lot of kids are, this is kind of a good ulterior game for them to play. So it's a game-based learning platform. And so they are doing the questions that you have for them, but they're also playing a game while they are answering the questions. So when we get in on the website, I'll show you all of the different games that you can choose from. And so if you're also following the ISTE standards, Blooket can meet the standard for Empowered Learner and Global Collaborator for the student. So it really keeps them engaged and it's a good tool for the classroom. The first thing that you would want to do is create an account, and I'm going to show you how to do that. The accounts are totally free. You get a lot of things just with the free account, but there is room for upgrades. So they have a Plus and a Plus Flex. And then you can also get group plans, and I'll show you what those look like. So Starter is free. You get a lot of different things with that. Plus is $2.99 a month, but you do have to pay a yearly. So it's like you pay it yearly instead of monthly, and you get more with that. And then you can do Plus Flex, which is $4.99 a month, and you get everything. So it's not too expensive if you do want kind of all of the features. And then if you were to want a group plan, so maybe your school wants to buy it for all of the teachers, or maybe you just want to use it in your department, you get it a little bit cheaper, and you get so many people get to use that account, and you get all of the features with that. Okay, so going back to creating an account, when you get on there, you'll just click sign up. And I just signed in with Google because I just signed in with my school email. And you create an account, or you create a username, and then you have to make sure that you're over 13, and then that's all that you do. You have an account. I'm going to talk about some features, and then we're going to actually get in the website, because the easiest way for me to show you how to use it is just to take you to it and walk you through it. So just some features that they have are that it's usable for many different ages. So elementary kids can play it all the way up to high school. Even adults have fun playing it. We play it with our teachers at school sometimes when we're just teaching about it. The gameplay can be solo or in groups, so it can be each student kind of for themselves, or you can group your students and each group is competing against each other. There is a Discover tab, kind of like on Kahoot, where you can look up different questions that have already been made, and you can use those for your classroom. And students have the ability, if they create an account, which is not necessary, they don't have to create an account to play, but if they want to, they can earn like points and coins every time they play. And then you can use those coins to like buy different little characters that you can use in the game. So if they're really into it and want to do that, they can use that. And then it does have a homework mode. And so say that you were having a test the next day and your student's homework was to complete the Blooket for like a review game or something. You can assign that for homework for them, and then you can go in and see what kind of questions they missed, how well they did, and then you can grade that for maybe like a study guide grade. Okay, so we're going to actually go into it. And so if you, I turned in my link on the discussion, but I can put it in the chat. But if you just click on this B, if you're looking at my slides, it'll take you to the website. And so this is what the homepage looks like, and it gives you just kind of a little bit of history and a little bit about Blooket. I'm going to click log in because I already have an account. And so when you log in, this was just one that I was playing with, so that's not anything usable, but this would be my set. So this would be where all of my questions and games that I've made would be. If you just want to look up one, so say you're crunched for time and you just want to look up something real quick, they have a ton that are already public that you can pick from. I teach family and consumer science, so if I was needing something on cooking, I could type in cooking, and you can see that there are a ton that people have already made. So it's not really necessary that you need to make your own, because there are so many out there. There's also, if you want to create, there's a create button up here. And it does look a little bit like Kahoot. You would just add a title. You can do an image if you want. You can make it private. So if you don't want it to show up on the Discover page, you can click private. It works with Quizlet. So if you have something that you want to import from Quizlet, like all the questions, you can do that. Or if you have a spreadsheet, you can also import that. And then it will save into your dashboard. And so you should be able to find it here. This is the homework section where you can assign all of the homework games for the students to play. If you want to play a game, you would just click play up here, and then you can put in the game ID. So it does, I keep talking about Kahoot, but it does really look like Kahoot. The only difference is that it's like a game within a game. So let me show you kind of what that looks like if I was going to start a game. So let me go to Discover, and I'm just going to pick this animal one right here. So if I wanted to host this game, I would click host over here. And then you get to pick what game you want your students to play while they're answering the questions. And so if you click on these, they'll tell you kind of what the object of the game is. Racing is the one that I've played more recently with some of my other teachers. And in this game, you're just, every time you answer a question right, you move up the track. And then if you like start answering a bunch of questions correct, you can get like power-ups and knock people behind. And so it does get that kind of competition aspect within kids who are really like the competition within the class, instead of just answering questions and there's really no like fun aspect to it. So that's kind of why I like Blooket a lot more than Kahoot or other review game tools. And then let's see, let me go back. Trying to find anything else that I didn't tell y'all. Oh, this is where you can, so the market up here is where you can spend your little coins and cash that you get. These little icons are like the little characters that you get to pick when you're playing a game. And so you can buy different packs of them, and it doesn't cost like real money. It's just the money that you've earned throughout the game. And that's pretty much all on here. The best way to learn it is just to kind of get in it. And you can play just solo games by yourself to just kind of learn how each game works. And just to open a random one up for your students one day and just play around with it. It is a lot of fun. And I think that kids will enjoy it and not get as burnt out on it as they would with Kahoot, because with Kahoot, it's just like questions and then you get the top 3 people, but actually getting to play a game while you're answering the questions, I think really helps students. Those are my resources. And if you need any help with learning about Blooket, you can reach out to me and I'll help the best I can.
All right, thanks, Madison. And you did have a question in the chat about the max number of students that can play. I know for school librarians, we have multiple classes a week, and Kim said she has 10 different classes a week. Do you know if there is a max number of students?
Each game, like if you're going to pick like the racing game or the Gold Rush, it'll tell you how many players can play. And so I was looking on there, some is like 60 players per game, some are 40. So you'll just kind of have to look at each game and see what the max is for that.
So if you need more than that, could you duplicate the game and just play 2 different ones until you reached your max players?
Yes, I believe so. And then I forgot to mention, so like your screen, if you are showing it on the smart board, the kids are going to see like whatever game you're playing, and on their screen, if they're on their phone or their Chromebook, they're just going to see like the questions and the answers. And then they can look up on the board and see like what place they're in. And you also have like an option, if you don't want kids' names to be shown, it'll just give them random names. So if you don't want the people to feel bad if they're in last place or something, it won't show their name.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'll put the link to your presentation in the chat for those that need it, that wanted the link directly to Blooket or your resources too.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, Ty is up next presenting, and I think he's got another tech tool to share too.
I do. I'm going to be sharing. Get that shared. Everyone see it?
Yes, you're good. I responded muted again.
No worries. I'm going to be sharing over one of my favorite topics, digital assessments, and specifically Edulastic. Has anyone ever used Edulastic before? Looks like we have a couple of people, or one person who has, one person who has not. I'll tell you, one of the things I think before we get into the topic of Edulastic is getting on the same page about using technology in classes. And I think Scheiniger puts it best. It's not what the adult does with technology that ultimately matters, but instead what the learners are doing with it. And really, that's the big goal of digitizing our assessments, is to take and transform assessments from assessments that focus just on like rote memory regurgitation to assessments that really get students doing things that help us better assess how much they understand or how competent they are at the standards we've identified. Whenever I look at technology just in general, if I'm going into classrooms to provide feedback to my teachers, I always keep this model in the back of my mind. The SAMR model is a framework that was developed by a guy named Dr. Ruben Puentedura, and it categorizes technology into 4 different degrees of integration: substitution, augmentation, modification, and redefinition. The way I think about those is substitution would just be having your students type an essay and not doing anything else with it. Whereas redefinition would be having them maybe develop a website and publish it through Google Sites and share those with the rest of the world. It can really depend on what we're doing, but the big thing with SAMR is it's a spectrum. It's not a stair step. Each modification is appropriate for different contexts. Using digital assessments can fit into any of these areas, but I think for me, thinking about it, its most apparent uses is to help us get to this modification level and redefinition through aggregating the data or having students perform higher level tasks on assessments. Another way to think about SAMR is through this model brought to us by Calkin and Trail. What they basically did is took the SAMR model and overlaid Bloom's taxonomy. And what we can see here is that the further up we get into the SAMR model, the deeper the cognitive demand gets on students. And so in my mind, being a former history teacher, it's the difference between asking students date questions and providing them readings and asking them to evaluate that reading. And digital assessments really help us get to that upper echelon of thinking for students and assessing their thinking. And so to start, kind of at the beginning with digital assessments, I think the University of Dublin offers the best definition of a digital assessment. Assessments which are fully enabled by digital technologies and often defined by their use of technologies. Digital assessments are technology centered. And there's a lot of reasons to use them. First and foremost, they're easy. They can easily incorporate higher level skills questions. And I'll show you some of those in Edulastic in a moment. Edulastic has a myriad of different question types, and Edulastic does a great job at really scaffolding for teachers how to write those questions. Digital assessments can provide instant feedback for students and teachers. And that's especially important when it comes to formative assessments. I'll show you on Edulastic as students are taking a test, Edulastic is going to give you some live feedback on how students are doing, aggregated by student, but also aggregated by a specific standard that's tagged into that question. And one thing that I think is sometimes undersold as important, but I think we do need to always keep it in our minds, especially as administrators, is it lessens the grading workload on teachers. It kind of takes out the grunt work and allows teachers to do the important work and the true purposeful work of assessment, which is looking at that data in professional learning communities in order to steer their instruction and really impact their own curriculum. Edulastic kind of does some of that for teachers, to where teachers don't have to go through and look at how many students got question number 2 wrong and tally it up. Edulastic's doing that for us. And so what is Edulastic? At its base, it's a digital assessment platform. It's something online that students access. It's something that we as educators create. It's a system that aggregates students' performance data according to identified standards. And then it's a software which provides a myriad of question types to reflect several depths of thinking. So first thing you always have to do is figure out how to get into the program. Easiest thing to do is go to Edulastic's website. I know most schools, I feel like in Arkansas, have Google Apps for Education now. And so I'll be honest, the easiest thing is to log in by clicking that sign in with Google in order to get in using your Google account, because that's going to make syncing your classes a lot easier. But if not, you can also sign in with Office 365 or with Clever if your school has that. If you don't have any of those, you also have the option to click that sign up button and just create an account from scratch. Now make sure you pick the appropriate area, either a teacher or administrator. And what I'm going to do here through the next couple of slides is just show you some of their features. But really, like a lot of technology, it requires some playing around with. So I'd encourage you, if you do want to look at using Edulastic for your class, look in the demo playground. That's where I got a lot of the images for today. And that's kind of how I got reacquainted with it back on the teacher end of it. So first and foremost, your dashboard is where all your classes are housed. Now there's two different ways to add students. The easiest is using Google. All you have to do is click that Sync with Google Classroom blue button. And if you used your Google Apps for Education account to log in, then it does all the groundwork for you. Now let's say halfway through a year, you get a new student added. You just go back to your Manage Classes tab and just click that blue Sync button again, and it'll update for you. Is there anyone who does not use Google Apps for Education in here? If you don't use Google Apps, you click that green Add Class button and you fill in the demographics here. One of the things I do want you to note is that you can select multiple standards. And so if you see on there the standard set, I selected Arkansas Reading Standards for Literacy and History, and then the Arkansas Social Studies Standards 1800 to 1900, because Social Studies actually has two sets of standards. And so you can make sure that you have access to those question types too. Now, once you complete that information and you're not using Google Apps for Education, you go to this screen and you just give those students the class code, or you can manually invite them by clicking on the Add Multiple Students or Add Students button. You can even click that print button and it'll print you a nice little ticket for you to give to students. The next tab I want us to visit is the Assignments tab. These are assignments that have already been given to students. This screen shows information like the assignment name, the class that it was assigned to, the type of assignment. Using Edulastic Premium, for instance, you can have a common assessment that aggregates the data a little differently by department or by team. The status, whether it's done, assigned, or in progress, how many students have submitted it, and how many have been graded, and then actions. One of the things that I used to do when I used Edulastic is I would not set the test to release the actual test with the correct answers until a couple of weeks out. That way I could ensure that students weren't going in there and trying to get the right answers. To assign a test, you can do it really three different ways. And to me, this is the big intuitive part of Edulastic, is you can assign a test through really divergent paths. You can go into the assignment and click that new assignment button. You can go into your dashboard, click on a class and assign it just to that class. Or you can go into your test tab and click on a test and assign that test to one class or multiple classes. Now, I know this looks like a lot. This is the assignment setting. But what I want to start out by telling you is once you get all this done, you can save that setting for future use. And so you'll always have to do the open and close date, but maybe you want to change the open policy, or maybe you want to change whether or not the questions are shuffled, or maybe you want to change the time test. You can always save it for future use, or you can keep it the same for every successive test that you're doing. And then this is the last part of the assignment settings. Performance bands are the things that show whether or not a student is mastering a particular skill or a particular standard. That is often set at a district level for users who have Edulastic Premium. Like in Conway, the performance bands are set at the district level. But if you're just using it alone, you can go in and edit your own performance bands. One of the things that I do want to draw your attention to is the choose test interface, that one way down at the bottom. You can actually change how the test looks. And so one of the options is ACT Aspire Arkansas. And so it would take your questions and change the formatting of it and change how the test looks to make it match the ACT Aspire. Now, while students are taking their test, this is the thing that kind of sold it for me, is that we get this view on our own computer. And so you can see per question at the top, which questions are high scoring. The green is correct, the red is incorrect. You can see by student which questions are being missed. Right now, we just see green and red squares, but there are also yellow squares, which are like partially correct or partially incorrect if you have a multiple select question. And then blue squares, which means that you have to go in and grade that one. Maybe it's an essay, but you can still develop a rubric for that in Edulastic to help you out. The other thing is the Express Grader, and that just kind of gives you a quick cursory look at how students are doing. And then the last one is the standards performance, which I think is really important. And so let's say this last test you gave, really all your questions were tied to just these two standards. It shows you which questions address that standard, and then how well students were doing on that standard and those questions. And so it gives you a really good talking point and a really good point of access to look at how students are doing on specific standards. Now, one of the things that I need to clarify is on this is just for one assessment, but in the Insights tab, you can look at it aggregated. And so if you're using just the regular version of Edulastic, not the premium, you have access to the standards gradebook, which is, for me, one of the most important ones. It'll show you by student how they're doing at mastering a specific skill or a specific standard. So RL 8.1, RL 8.2, but then it'll show you all of your students, how they're doing. So you can tell here just by looking at it quickly, I need to go back and readdress RL 8.1. Students are doing okay at RL 8.2. RL 8.3, I don't know if I need to go back and cover that. I've just got 33% of students who are not mastering that. And so that, I think, helps us with the triage of how students are doing in our course in reference to those standards. The next stop is the item bank, which is just what Edulastic calls their questions. You have access to this many items. Now, you can filter those through grade level, subject. I think it's easier to do it through standard set or standards. That way you're really getting those questions that address your specific standard or your specific content. You can also do it based on question type. Now, let's say you want to write your own test from scratch. That's great. You just click this new item button and it takes you to a screen that looks like this, and it shows you each question genre and then question types within it. You can do things like basic multiple choice questions, multiple select. My anatomy and physiology teachers, they like to use this label image with a drag and drop. They can upload a skeletal system and have students drag and drop different labels to match femur, radius, ulna, whatever they're assessing over. One of the things that I used a lot when I was teaching history, when we got a big literacy push, was the passage with questions, because it really helped us get students used to answering questions that at the time were on the PARCC assessment and now the ACT Aspire, but also it helped us address and look at whether or not students were meeting those standards. Now, when you get into actually writing the question, Edulastic does a great job at guiding you through it. For every question type, they have a how-to video. And so let's say you want to take a leap of faith and do a question type you've never done before. You click into it and you watch the how-to video, and it'll guide you through each one of these are about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes long. And then each one of those, you can go in to create a new test. So let's say you click this new test button, you can go through and select those test questions and just throw it into that test. That was really handy for me when we got to an end of course exam or a midterm or a final, and I could just go back through my past questions and look at them and maybe duplicate them and edit them a bit. So they're kind of the same, but I'm changing some stuff up to keep consistency across my questions. Kind of like the item bank, you can search the test library to see if maybe there's a test you want to use. And then I do want to end with this. Scheninger says, success relies on technology being used to support interactive learning, to create and explore rather than to drill and kill, and the right blend of teachers and technology. And for me, it's that last clause Scheninger has, that we could have all the technology in the world, but we have to have the right blend of teachers and technology to know when and how to use that. Edulastic is a lot. To kind of scaffold it some more for y'all, I developed what I call a quick guide. Edulastic has a ton of how-to videos. My big suggestion and encouragement and piece of advice is to start small. Maybe start with small formative assessments and just go from there, trying different question type for question type. I will upload the link to this in the chat for y'all to look at some more if you'd like. And then there are all my references. Thank y'all.
Great, thank you, Ty. If anyone has any questions for Ty, you can pop those into the chat for him about Edulastic. I know there are so many layers to it, and it's added on over the last few years of its complexity.
Every day it seems like it changes.
All right, and Tara is up next for us. We've got 2 more presenters for those of you that are sticking around with us.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen share for you to see. Okay, are you guys able to see that?
Yes, we got you pulled up.
All right, I'm going to start a timer to keep myself on time too. So I have a quick scale of sheets about how you're feeling today, and I'm not going to spend much time on this. If you want to pop in which number you are feeling today, I'm going to go ahead and tell you though, on a few of my slides, I have these Bitmojis, and they are going to give you tips of different assistive technologies you can use. My name is Tara Williams, and this is my assistive technology for the classroom and beyond. I'm a teacher at Sacred Heart Elementary. I teach 3rd grade. I'm also a UCA instructional technology grad student. Another tip is to use a schedule. So this is a schedule of today's professional learning overview. Assistive technologies can be used for people with disabilities and people who do not have disabilities. I'm a very scheduled person. I love having a schedule to look at. And we're going to get started with the definition of assistive technology. Assistive technology is any item, piece of equipment, software program, or product system that is used to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of a person with disabilities. And I taught 2nd grade the past 2 previous years, and we had a lesson on technology. And during that lesson, I taught my students that technology does not have to be something electronic. It can be something as simple as a pencil. So a definition of technology is the specific methods, materials, and devices used to solve a practical problem. So when you think of assisted technology, it does not have to be something electronic. So one of the assisted technology tips that you could use for this is to highlight text, just something simple. It makes it stand out to you. If you will take out your phone, if you have it available, you can scan this QR code. It will take you to a survey about what you know about assistive technologies. I had a timer here. It's going to give you about 1 minute. I'll probably stop it before it goes off. But for teachers or caregivers, having a timer
can be very helpful to children and adults with cognitive disabilities. This timer is from Myers & Johnson's. It's an assistive technology device that can be used in the classroom or at home. I'm going to go ahead and pause that and go to the next slide because I don't want to go over. Oh. All right, why should we use assistive technology? Assistive products address different functional areas such as cognition, communication, vision, hearing, continence, and mobility. This is from the WHO website. WHO is the World Health Organization. We heard a lot from WHO during COVID. They were on TV talking about different things, but they also have some really great resources for assistive technology. I'll be showing you that link here in just a little bit. Assistive products list can include things like hearing aids, wheelchairs, communication aids, spectacles, or what we call glasses now. If you'll notice at the bottom, the use of text with pictures, such as the hearing aids, spectacles, and wheelchairs, is a helpful assistive technology that you can incorporate for students with disabilities. Who can use assistive technologies to help them? Students who are blind or visually impaired, those who are deaf or hard of hearing, speech disabilities, mobility assistance, or students with learning, cognitive, and developmental disabilities. So there's a lot of disabilities and a lot of different types of assistive technologies. These are just a few that we may notice with our students. Some of the ones you can more easily see. Forms of assistive technology. This is where I have this link for the WHO website. And as I was saying, they have a lot of great information. They've created several different ways to get assistive technologies to people around the world. There's all kinds of news links and videos and articles that you can watch. It just has a lot of resources for using assistive technologies and people with disabilities. I have another link here that I'll show you on a later slide, but it's from the Assistive Technology Checklist. It's from the California Department of Education, and I'll be showing you that on a later slide. The need for assistive technology. So WHO estimates that today more than 1 billion people need one or more assistive products. So it's especially important with our aging population too. A lot of them need 2 or more products as they age. My father-in-law, who is a disabled vet, he has hearing aids and glasses and a walker. So lots of our aging population needs assistive technologies. In response to this, WHO has developed a global initiative. It's the Global Corporation of Assistive Technology, and they are working to get assistive technology and devices to people around the world who need it. Another tip is to use a screen reader. So if you was using a screen reader to view my PowerPoint, this picture has alt text that would pick up and allow you to see or hear what's being in the picture. And this is something I seen in one of my undergrad classes, and I really liked it. It really struck me, and I've remembered it. So when I was doing this, I went searching for this picture. You'll notice the boy in the wheelchair says, "Could you please shovel the ramp?" And the man with the shovel says, "All the other kids are wanting to use the stairs. When I get through shoveling them off, then I will clear the ramp for you." And the boy says, "But if you shovel the ramp, we can all get in." So clearing the path for people with special needs clears the path for everyone. You'll hear a lot about that with things in universal design. So assistive technology is important for students with disabilities, but also for those who say that there's a system as a whole should support all students. This system or framework, again, is called universal design. And this is where you really have to tack into your leadership skills and support your students with disabilities. What the experts say is using technology can help students with disabilities to enhance or improve their independence and academic employment tasks. So you really, on this tip is size and color. You really want to have a clear background and use very basic fonts when you're typing things for students with disabilities. If you have some of those cursive fonts or those that are really hard to see, some of your students may not be able to do very well reading those. So size and color is a very important tip to use when you're making PowerPoints for your students. How do you approach That's not fair, miss. So some of you may have heard this before in your classroom. So if you can imagine that you're giving a test to your students and all of them who are wearing glasses, you tell them they have to first take off their glasses because it provides an unfair advantage for them. Well, that's pretty preposterous. Those students need their glasses to see. That would never happen. So how is it whose students use a word processor to take notes because of dyslexia or dysgraphia are any different? So you want to take that away from them, and you don't want to take the glasses away from the students who need them either. Those are both things that support your students with disabilities. Another thing you could use is a word processor or a word device to pronounce words. The word preposterous may be hard for some of your students to read, so you could put that into an online word pronouncer or a device that pronounces that word for those students. And here is this list from the California Department of Education. It has some really great assistive technologies. And again, technology doesn't mean it's computer or electronic. The first one on here is an adaptive pencil grip. That's something you could provide to all of your students. So it would support your students who have disabilities and help those who do not, especially if you teach kinder or some of the early grades. All of my Bitmoji tips that I have on here came from this California Department of Education website. It's a great list if you want to go back and look at it. Another way to incorporate assistive technology is through Google add-ons. So a lot of our schools use Chromebooks, and there's a lot of great features from Google. You have accessibility apps, things that read the screen for you. There's a little demo section if you log into your settings, how to get started using these simulators. It teaches you how, and just tons of different things you can use to help make those Chromebooks accessible for your students with disabilities. And here's my references. The last part, or my last tip that I'm going to say, is to record your lessons. That allows your students to go back and watch them later. Some of them may want to take notes or pause it for different things. So this is my resource list if you want to go back and look at any of these. I will also post my PowerPoint in the chat so you can check out any of these references or hyperlinks for you to look at.
Great, thank you, Tara. There were so many great resources and pieces of information there as well. If you have any questions for her, just pop that into the chat. And I do know that we've already had one session for Universal Design for Learning, which Justin talked about a little bit, that was presented this summer. It's on YouTube, but there is another session coming up with Miss Shelley House, and she does a phenomenal job of kind of breaking down UDL and some of that assistive technology that Tara just discussed and how to incorporate it into your class. So I'm going to put links to that information in the chat too. And our last presenter is Samantha. Samantha, you're still muted.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. I just put some links in that you're going to need. One is to the PowerPoint, and there's a second link. I might have to put it back in again. It's to the Padlet that is in the PowerPoint later. And if you want to go ahead and look at it, you can do that now. But let me share my screen.
I swear I'm going to make a t-shirt that says, "Let me share my screen," because I've said it so many times.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yep, you're good to go.
Okay. Okay. My presentation today is about digital citizenship, but I named it, I Googled it, making students into great digital citizens. And I named it this because I don't know how many times that I asked my students, well, where'd you get that from? Where'd you get your information from? And they're like, from Google. I said, no, you didn't get it from Google. Google took you to a place where you got it from, but what website did you get your information from? So, or you might, you know, sometimes I have students that think that everyone that they meet online is their friend, and they try to friend everyone online, even if they don't know them face to face. And then I even have kids that think if they delete it, it's gone. No one else can ever see it or get it again. So in any of the cases, if you have students that think any of the same things that my students think, then we need to do a better job of teaching digital citizenship. We're going to look at what is digital citizenship, why, 5 reasons why you should teach it, what you should teach, and how you should teach it. All right. What is digital citizenship? According to dictionary.com, digital citizenship is the skills and knowledge to safely, effectively, and responsibly use the internet and other digital technologies as media literacy skills to evaluate the accuracy of information found online, anti-cyberbullying strategies, or online privacy practices. That's really wordy, and I work with young kids. So my favorite definition actually comes from the Common Sense Media, which you've heard mentioned here today. It's an awesome website. And theirs is very direct and to the point to help younger learners really understand. But they define digital citizenship as the responsibly using technology to learn, create, and participate. And that's what we want our kids to do with it. We want them to learn, create, and participate. So why should we teach digital responsibility? This came from the author, her name is Nina W. She's an author at GoGuardian. And she says teaching digital citizenship equips students with the knowledge, skills, and resources to succeed as lifelong learners. And this also helps them to learn to engage within a digital environment with responsibility and confidence to develop as leaders. In her article, it was called 5 Reasons to Teach Digital Citizenship This School Year. She highlights these 5 reasons here. Reason 1 is information literacy. Today's students have such easy access to so many resources. They need to be able to differentiate between the useful resources and the fake or spam type resources. And by teaching digital literacy, we empower those students with the skills and understanding to use technology to their benefit. They'll be able to quickly and effectively find information and have the means of
Samantha, we lost your volume. I can't hear you. Samantha, we can't hear you. Oh, there you are.
Okay.
You're kind of robotic, so it may just be a connection lag.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yep, I got you.
Okay. Her 3rd reason was online safety. Let's be honest, there are threats online. The people aren't honest about who they are or what their motives are, and we must teach students to protect themselves and their identities by visiting appropriate websites, refraining from posting personal information about themselves and others, trusting their gut, and notifying a trusted adult when things don't feel right. Her 4th reason is digital responsibility. Have you ever heard the little saying or quote, with power comes great responsibility? Well, that internet is that power. And we as teachers, we
lost your volume again.
Usage of technology. And the 5th reason is for health and emotional wellness. It's all about balance. Technology can be addictive and can have actual physical consequences such as mental stress, poor eyesight, even dietary issues. So it's important we teach them balance. We need to encourage them to limit their time and take frequent breaks and make sure they still make time for face-to-face relationships with their friends and family. Here was a little image I found I thought was very interesting. This was from 2020, and it says every minute of a day, and it has all these large numbers of all the people that do so many different things every minute of the day. And you got to think we're at 22 now, so this numbers have to be going up. just people using their phones to order DoorDash, people using Instagram. It had people using Facebook, TikTok, Spotify, how many packages are shipped in a minute from Amazon, Facebook. I just thought it was kind of interesting to look at that. I mean, and it's only going to keep increasing. That's why it's so important that we communicate all this digital citizenship stuff to these students and they understand it and can use it. I have a quote here from Kevin Honeycutt, and it says, "Our kids are growing up on a digital playground and no one is on recess duty." I thought this was kind of significant, and there is a link here to a Padlet, which I think I put it in chat, and it just has asked you to respond to the quote. But I thought it was interesting because it's going to be up to us, or these kids are out there. I already see it in the elementary school. They're out there using all the social media apps. They're bullying online. They're photographing and taking, secret videos of teachers and posting them. That happened just this year in my school. So they've got to be supervised, or we've really got to teach them the rules. So you can do that Padlet at any time, but I'm going to keep going. So what should I teach when I teach digital citizenship? This is what I teach. This all came from Common Sense Media. There's 6 different parts of digital citizenship. I love Common Sense Media. I can't say that enough. Their lessons are already planned for you. They're written out. They have standards. They have objectives. They're scripted. They have vocabulary. They have slide decks already created for you. They include videos for you. They include student handouts. They even have parent information that you can send home with them. It all works with Google Classroom, so it's easy to, just to give it all to them digitally if you need to. But these are their 6 main areas, and really, they really relate well, I thought, with the 5 reasons why you should do this. But the first one is media balance and well-being, and we talked about that. These lessons focus on addiction, and then the addiction to video games and different things, and just to social media, and then trying to balance that in your life. There's a lot of reflection involved in their lessons, where you reflect on your emotions and how these things make
It looks like I've got Samantha frozen. Is anyone else having that problem? Oh, now she came back on.
Oh.
Sorry. You froze for a second.
Okay. Okay, next one, digital footprint and identity. These lessons consider the benefits and risks of online sharing, and explore like your digital persona, how this affects yourself and your reputation and your relationships. It also goes into lessons on gender stereotyping. Relationships and communication. These lessons teach students to reflect on how they use intrapersonal and interpersonal skills to strengthen online positive communication and communities. It starts talking about like digital stressors, and introduces concepts like predator and setting boundaries. And some of that might get into the older student lessons, because this is a K-12 platform. Cyberbullying, digital drama, and hate speech. These lessons guide students through tough topics by playing the active role of the upstander to build positive, supportive online communities and combat online cruelty. I'll be honest, I never teach the cyberbullying lessons in my district. A long time ago, it was decided the counselor would do those. So those are kind of off my plate, but she takes care of the cyberbullying lessons through Common Sense Media also. And the last one is the news and media literacy. To me, this is like library material for sure right here, because these are your lessons that talk about credible and trustworthy sources of information, how to be a responsible creator and a consumer, but it's also about giving proper credit. And, just like my title said, I Googled it. That's not gonna work. Okay, this last slide here is some different resources I found. And of course, I already have it linked to Common Sense Media. But in conjunction with that, if you like totally interactive lessons, Nearpod. Nearpod are Common Sense lessons, but they've been adapted. Nearpod is like an interactive slideshow. It's like Pear Deck kind of. You control it, or you can just have it student paced and the students can work through it at their own pace. It has things like polls. They can draw. Everything, because my non-readers can't read it. So I need to incorporate the sound function with that. Everfi was one I found. It was called Ignition, I believe. And it was a 6th through 9th grade digital citizenship lessons curriculum. And I haven't never used that. My school only goes to 5th grade, but I thought it looked very promising. Be Internet Awesome is through Google. And I would use that with upper elementary. Sometimes, I've been toying with the idea of trying it with my 4th and 5th grade, because by the time we get to 4th and 5th grade, if they've had my common sense lessons all those years, they're looking for something a little bit different. Be Internet Awesome it uses Pear Deck, and it has some great lessons that you teach, and they can be interactive with Pear Deck, but it also has a game function, which the kids love. And then go into their their game. If it's a game, they love it. Now, I just found the social media test drive, which I really liked it. I'm not sure if it's elementary or not. It might be middle school and up, but they give you video modules. The kids will work through each module you could assign. And like the first one I noticed was like, they would go into a scenario where it made them create their own account for something, a pretend account. And then they had to create a strong, the lesson was teaching creating strong passwords. So they had in creating their own account, they created the strong password. And then the last one up here at the top was Evolve. This is just a curriculum. It doesn't have all the cute lessons or the interactivity, but it was a really good curriculum. It's K through 12. It was created by these two ladies, and it's very well written out, but it involves, I think, 9 levels. I think 9 levels where Common Sense just uses 6. So you just have to, as an educator, you're going to find the one that works the best for you, that you're the most comfortable with, and just stick with it and teach it. That's my advice, because the students are going to need that. If they're going to be leaders in their digital age isn't going away. They're going to need the citizenship. Okay, here are my references, which I've also referenced all the resources I showed you. And if you have any questions, there's my contact information.
Great, thank you, Samantha. And I did mention that EdVol from Dr. Lindsay and Dr. Matson was designed as a scope and sequence document, but it's more scope than sequence. It gives you a vertical alignment, but not necessarily what to do per grade level. So it's very easy to understand. They do give you some very good resources. If you have any questions for Samantha, you can pop those in the chat. I will adjust our time on your certificate to 3 hours for professional learning. If you have any questions for any of us, we'll hang out here for just a little bit until everyone leaves the room. So if you are in my class, hang out till everyone is left. And if not, look forward to seeing your reflections and information provided in our evaluation form, which I'm going to link in the chat right now. If you don't grab it from the chat, it will be with your PD certificate tomorrow or the following day.